Well, how quickly this conference has come almost for me to an end. This is my last session. Tomorrow there will be a question and answer period that all of us will participate in. I have been dealing with current trends within modern day Christianity that are unbiblical. And the book which I've written and it's been published within the last year, The Good Shepherd Calls, an urgent message to the last days church. And in this session I'm going to continue with some of these trends. Before I do, again, I want to mention the Bryce Holmes International Program for Widows and Orphans. These pamphlets are on the book table in the other room. Please take one. Just have a look at it and see what the program is about. And much of our time and energy is spent coming alongside hopeless children in other parts of the world, providing them with shelter, food, clothing, Christian education. And this is a good balance, I believe, to the ministry of discernment in which we're constantly on the front lines battling with false teaching. So please check that out. If you're interested, you can participate. You can also go to our website, understandthetimes.org, and if you click on the globe right at the top of the page, it will open up the various countries where we're involved. So you can actually choose a location, get more information about those different countries, which include Myanmar, the Philippines, Kenya, South Africa, Mexico, Haiti, India, and even the United States. I'm going to try to cover two trends in this session. We have about an hour. Things that are happening within the name of Christianity, which I believe are preparing the church to become part of a one-world global spirituality, which the Bible addresses and which Christians need to understand and warn others. And my first topic, the first trend I'm going to deal with, you may find this topic, well, you might find it somewhat shocking. When Christianity becomes a cult. Satan has a strategy, as we've been pointing out. The Bible says the wiles of the devil. He has a strategy to deceive. He has a devious plan. And his plan is to deceive people in the name of Christ. While Jesus Christ and his word should be the focus of every believer, Satan knows how to deceive humans into believing they're following Jesus when instead they're following a man-made system in the name of Christ that is leading them astray. So this is what I call the basis of the cult of Christianity. When people follow men, their methods, and their movements, rather than following the Good Shepherd, Jesus Christ, and his word, that is how Christianity can become a cult. What is a cult? Well, I want to take some information from a friend of mine, colleague and researcher, author Mike Oppenheimer, who has a ministry called Let Us Reason. It provides us with some important insights to help us to recognize if someone is in a cult. These are questions that can help us identify as to whether we or someone else we may know is in such a situation. While not all cults necessarily exhibit these characteristics, these questions are useful for helping us to understand deviant movements that embrace unbiblical, abusive ideas and dangerous beliefs to the Christian faith as well as our personal lives. Here's some of the questions that Oppenheimer presents. The more questions you can answer yes to, the more likely it is that a loved one you know may be involved in a cult-like or a cult-like group. Let's examine some of these questions. Are you told not to question what is being taught because the leaders say they're honest and want the best for you, and that so you must trust them? Now, I know in talking with a lot of people, even some of you here at this conference, that you've gone to your leaders in churches that are teaching things that seem unusual or strange and unbiblical, and you've asked them graciously, why are we doing these things? And generally the response from the leaders is, just follow what we're telling you to do. We know what's best for you. You should be aware. That's very dangerous if they can't provide for you biblical answers. Has someone replaced your own choices in life? Are you told not to ask questions? Why anyone is left? Are you to accept the answers the leaders give you, such as, well, they fell in sin, they didn't receive correction, they weren't open, or they had a bad heart, or they didn't want to be disciples? Are you told that you must belong to that particular church or group to be saved and go to heaven, and that is the only true church? If you want to leave, are you told are you being told that no other church practices truth, and if you leave, you are shunned? That's a common thing. When people stand up against the direction that they see that's happening, in particular in the things that I've been talking about in the emerging church, when you go to the leadership and you stand up and you say, I don't agree with this, can you give me some explanation? Why all of a sudden we're being introduced to these ideas that are not biblical? And all of a sudden you're shunned by the leadership and others in the church. Are you made to feel like you're a failure? That your performance is not up to par to the group's standards? Do they put down others to make themselves look better, calling themselves righteous and others unrighteous? Do they stop you from reading anything negative about themselves, or recommend that you don't read it for your own spiritual protection? Or do they recommend for you to be around their people, expecting you to be at all the group activities? If not, your spirituality and dedication are questioned when a cult becomes a cult. Now, as I read these things, and these are from Oppenheimer's literature, identifying what a cult is, I just wanted you to think about certain situations. Does this sound like something that's happening in Christianity today? Do they defend all that they do even when it can be harmful or morally wrong? Or do they operate in false humility? Or are they arrogant and demand you to obey if you are considering otherwise? Or is it done subtly by manipulating you into obeying the statements such as, real Christians obey their leaders? Or if you were following Jesus, you would see what I'm saying is right. True disciples, they say, do not question Jesus. Cult leaders often say, or have you heard, don't go against God's anointed. We must follow Jesus and his word. And following men and their ideas are going to lead us into trouble if these men are not following Jesus. When you ask questions about their own history or the group's history, they're vague in their answers or avoid answering them. Not answering or postponing it will make it go away. See, these are some of the characteristics of cultish activity. What I've discovered that this is exactly what we see taking place today within Christianity, when Christianity becomes a cult. So this is the question. Are you following a man and a man-made system, or are you following Jesus Christ and the Bible? Perhaps this illustration will help it to make this somewhat clear. You see, every Christian is supposed to keep the focus on Jesus and His Word. Christians, collectively, are to keep our eyes on Jesus, focused on Jesus Christ. But something can happen very easily and we don't even notice it. Rather than being focused on Jesus Christ, all of a sudden we're involving or we're focusing on a particular man or men and their teachings that come between us and the Word of God, Jesus. Or it may be that the methods that these men are teaching, for example, for church growth, have become the major part of our belief system. Also, cutting us off from seeing Jesus. Or it may be participating in a movement. Large groups of Christians gathered together under a canopy of a belief system. And that becomes the focus of our Christianity. It blocks us from seeing Jesus. And when that happens, we no longer follow Jesus, the Good Shepherd. We no longer have the focus that we once had. And that has been removed. And now all we see, rather than Jesus, is darkness. And eventually, that darkness is filled with apostasy, a falling away from the faith. I think this has happened throughout Christian history. But I think particularly it's happening right now. The path to deception starts out when people follow Jesus Christ and His Word, and then, for some reason, they're misled. They switch the course. Eventually, they add to or delete from the Word of God with new ideas. It can become an entire new faith. They begin to establish a religious system that may be in the name of Christ, when it actually becomes a system of control, leading people away from Christ to a counterfeit form of Christianity. And according to the Scriptures, I believe that this is exactly what is going to happen. It's happening now, and where it's headed in the future towards a global spirituality which is going to set up the world for the religion of the Antichrist. Now here's another interesting question. Is it possible for over 1 billion people to follow a man, believing they're following Jesus Christ? Do you think it is? Absolutely. And if you talk to them, they don't believe that they are. But they have put a man and his ideas, his teachings, dogmas, traditions between them and Jesus Christ and the Word of God. And this is extremely dangerous. For if this man stands up in front of the world and makes a statement like, all religions worship the same God, are you going to continue to follow him? When Christianity becomes a cult, it's possible that that can happen. But what about a Protestant cult-like teachings? and teachers. Are Protestants immune? No, they're not. Think of a particular method, well-known method of teaching that has attracted many, many people. And then think of a name of a leader. I could mention numerous ones. When it comes to, for example, positive thinking, what leader has promoted positive thinking as the central axis of biblical Christianity when it is not? Or what about seeker-friendly? Countless thousands of churches have followed that particular model and devastated Christianity from a biblical faith into a seeker-friendly faith which completely demolishes the gospel. You see, people look for leaders to follow because they see if leaders are successful, they want to be successful too. And many, many churches that once taught the truth, following men and their ideas and their methods, have led millions astray. Or here's one you'll recognize. Purpose-driven. Where do you find purpose-driven in the Bible? And why is it that so many churches have fallen into this concept that purpose-driven is the way to grow a megachurch, which, by the way, is possible? Do you know that there are man-made methods that will grow churches, but these churches are shallow? They're ecumenical. They're unbiblical. They're entertainment centers. And they tickle the ears of many, many people. Now, I've done some research in the past with regards to how so many people have been caught up into these programs. If you read Faith Undone, you will know we did a whole section on how this occurred in modern-day Christianity, tracing the megachurch growth movement back to one particular individual who most people never heard of. His name is Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker was a man who was well known for his advisory capacity in corporate growth. But later in his life, he became very influential in church growth. I got introduced to Peter Drucker through actually some of my friends that were involved in Calvary Chapel. Pastor Paul Smith, brother of Pastor Chuck Smith, they were introduced to Peter Drucker 25 years ago, when Drucker was looking to the large churches, particularly in the Calvary Chapel movement, to see if he could introduce them to church growth methods so that they could get bigger and that they could influence the world. He saw that the church was the way to influence the world. Drucker was a visionary. In 1955, he wrote this book called Landmarks of Tomorrow. And by the way, I learned something at this conference, that Drucker was a member of this group, Frankfurt, these scholars who were Marxists in ideology, who came to America to change education. Drucker was part of that, and his idea was to change the world through working through the megachurch market. In his book, Landmarks of Tomorrow, written in 1955, Drucker, is a visionary, laid out his visionary plan for the world in the future, which sounds very much like Satan's plan that originated at Babylon. I've mentioned this before. Satan's plan for man to deceive the world. This plan is brought back into the last days, deceive the world and the church, to reconstruct the Babylonian plan for man, to bring back mankind together again. We know that Satan, the god of this world, wants to be king, to set up a global political system like at Babylon, a global political or economic system like at Babylon, and a global religious system. Drucker, in his book, had what he called the three-legged stool plan. Now, I mentioned Drucker because he's been very, very influential in reshaping Christianity, reinventing modern-day Christianity. And my topic is when Christianity becomes a cult. So when Christian leaders begin to follow a church growth model based on the ideas of a man and not the Word of God, I think there's deep trouble. Especially in light of the insight and understanding that we get from the Bible that in the last days there will be the harlot, that global church, the counterfeit bride that will be prepared for the counterfeit Christ. Drucker's three-legged stool plan. Drucker had a partner in his agenda. His name was Bob Buford. Bob Buford and Drucker formulated a group which worked together called the Leadership Network. The Leadership Network also had an agenda to train up men that could influence others through the books that they wrote, the topics that they presented. Some of these men and the agenda that they presented was a reinvention of biblical Christianity for the postmodern generation, and some of them are. Church reimagined, spiritual information of people in the communities of faith. Doug Paget. Another one, Dan Kimball, the Emergent Church, vintage Christianity for new generations. Or an additional one, the Sacred Way, Tony Jones. These were only three that I'm mentioning that worked together, Leadership Network, in order to promote their ideas through the publishers of our day that have influenced countless thousands of people. And this one here, which I'm sure you have heard of before, Brian D. McLaren. Brian D. McLaren's books, well, let me mention a few of them. A Generous Orthodoxy, More Ready Than You Realize, The Church on the Other Side. All of these books, and he's written many, many books, are all about how Christianity needs to be prepared for this generation, the postmodern generation, and our basic ideas and teachings that were once biblically based essentially need to be destroyed. I brought up McLaren because he is very, very, very influential in promoting the ideas which the present-day Emergent Church has embraced. And just over these past few months, I've been reading through McLaren's newest book, which really explains how dangerous all of this is. The book is titled The Great Spiritual Migration, how the world's largest religion is seeking a better way to be Christian. Is there a better way to be Christian than being biblical? Well, I don't think so. I think that's what Christianity is all about. It's being biblical. It's following Jesus Christ and the teachings that we find in the Word of God. But not according to these modernists that are part of the emerging church that are promoting an ecumenical unity with Rome and all religions. It's not just the Pope that's talking about getting together with all religions. Now it's these so-called evangelical pastors who write books that are part of the emerging church. In the Flyleaf, it's a hardcover book with a paper cover. McLaren, or this is what's stated by the publisher, Brian McLaren, a leading voice in contemporary religion, argues that notwithstanding the dire headlines about the demise of faith and drop in church attendance, Christian faith is not dying. Rather, it's embarking on a once-in-an-era spiritual shift. For millions, the shift has already begun. Drawing from his work as a global activist, pastor, and public theologian, McLaren challenges readers to stop worrying, waiting, and indulging in nostalgia, and instead to understand the powerful new standings that are shaping the faith. In The Great Spiritual Migration, he explores three profound shifts that define the change. So there you have it, in words clearer than what I can personally explain to you. There's a spiritual shift, a spiritual migration away from biblical Christianity to a new form of Christianity. Number one, spiritually, growing numbers of Christians are moving away from defining themselves by lists of beliefs and moving toward a way of life defined by love. Remember what the Pope said in the video? God is love. Buddhists says God is love. Hindus say God is love. The Jews say God is love. According to this new form of a belief system, it's all about God is love. Number two, theologically, believers are increasingly rejecting the image of God as a violent supreme being and embracing the image of God as the renewing spirit at work in our world for the common good. The common good. And how many teachers from the pulpit today are talking about let's work together with other religious systems for the common good? I will mention one to you here in a few moments. Number three, missionally, the faithful are identifying less with organized religion and more with organizing religion. Spiritual activists dedicated to healing the planet, building peace, overcoming poverty and injustice, and all collaborating with other faiths to ensure a better future for all of us. Collaborating with other faiths, working together for the common good. Page 175, and this will further help us to understand the direction that Christianity is headed when we follow men and their ideas, their methods and their movements. Here's the question. How can Christians organizing for the common good then join with other religious communities in a multi-faith movement to restore the planet, empower the poor, and build peace? Multi-faith solutions are necessary because the crises we face cannot be solved by any one religion, just as they cannot be contained by national boundaries. Desmond Tutu, the Dalai Lama, and Pope Francis amplified the new kind of global religious leadership. They see the need of interfaith and multi-faith mobilization. Now we need tens of thousands of religious leaders of upcoming generations to follow their lead, to stop functioning as religious bureaucrats trapped within the confining walls of our respective institutions, and to rise together in courageous collaboration to face the fierce and urgent challenges of our generation. So that's an update of where we're headed in this new revamping, reinvention of Christianity for modern-day believers to embrace other religious groups working together for the cause of good. And where did all of this originate from? Well, you can trace it back to Peter Drucker and his megachurch madness, church growth. And if you get a copy of The Good Shepherd Calls, an urgent message to the last days church. You're going to see a whole section in there about the megachurch madness. Church growth is a big business. Megachurches, we're being told, are the mark of success. And sure enough, there are a lot of megachurches, big churches, millions of dollars being spent for entertainment. Surveys determine what people want in a community and how to attain growth in a church. They find out what people want. And then they tickle their ears, fill the pews. And biblical Christianity is under attack. It's undermined. Oh, every once in a while they mention a few terms. But when it comes right down to the gospel of Jesus Christ according to his word and warning about the dangers of ecumenical unity, unity with Rome, and a coming one world religion, it is never heard. No one talks about Bible prophecy and what lies ahead, the judgment of God upon the earth. Not ever mentioned. Pastors that teach the truth about apostasy are laughed at and scorned. In order to become popular, megachurch pastors are saying, we don't deal with Bible prophecy. We've toned it down. The younger generation doesn't want to hear it. They want to be in touch with the younger generation to fill their pews. And those with the white heads, well, they're already over the hill. It's time for them to leave. I want to mention three well-known pastors who were influenced by Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker was their mentor. You will know all of their names. Number one, Robert Schuller. Number two, Bill Hybels, Willow Creek, seeker-friendly. Number three, America's pastor, Rick Warren. Now let me show you their pictures. Robert Schuller, deceased. His church was in Orange, California, about 6 miles away from where I live in Costa Mesa. Crystal Cathedral went bankrupt. Do you know who owns the Crystal Cathedral now? Roman Catholic Diocese of Orange. And millions of dollars have been spent to redecorate. Schuller was already down the track to ecumenism before he died. Positive confession. All kinds of ideas and teachings that were unbiblical. Very popular. He understood church growth mythology. Bill Hybels, Willow Creek Community Church, Illinois. Many, many churches throughout the world went after this seeker-friendly model till Hybels finally said, you know, we've got a problem. Many of our people, we've gone down this seeker-friendly path, but they're not very spiritual. So we need to backtrack. Do you know what they're doing at Willow Creek now? They have meetings called The Practice, where they've brought in a Jesuit priest to teach the spiritual practices of Ignatius Loyola and others. Contemplative Christianity. And then, well-known pastor Rick Warren in the Purpose-Driven Peace Plan. In an interview with Tim Russ at December 2006 regarding his plan to defeat the planet's 5 biggest giants, Rick Warren stated, a one-legged stool will fall over, a two-legged stool will fall over, and business and government alone cannot solve these problems. They haven't, or they would have. The third leg of the stool is the churches. There's a public sector role, there's a private sector role, and there is a faith sector role. 3 legs. The three-legged stool plan, the same plan of Peter Drucker. purpose-driven life, which is sold, well, they say more copies now than the Bible in over 100 languages around the world. Promote by Rick Warren his peace plan. P for, well, it was planting churches, but then changed to promoting reconciliation. E for equipping leaders. A for assisting the poor. C for caring for the sick. And E for educating the next generation. Peace plan, of course, was partnered with Tony Blair, former Prime Minister of England, to work together with religious leaders of various groups and backgrounds for the cause of good. In Warren's own words, he said, "I'm looking at a stadium full of people," this was their 25th anniversary, "telling God they will do whatever it takes to establish God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. What will happen if the followers of Jesus say to him, 'We are yours'? What kind of spiritual awakening will occur?" And remember the statement, the third leg of the stool is the churches. There's a public sector role, there's a private sector role, there is a faith sector role. The churches is equivalent to what we call the faith sector role. And the definition of the faith sector role can include any faith, but particularly the Roman Catholic faith. Rick Warren at the Pew Forum stated May 23rd, 2005, "When you get 25% of America, which is basically Catholic, and you get 28 to 29% of America, which is evangelical together, that's called a majority. And it's a very powerful bloc. If they happen to stay together on a particular issues, I would encourage you to look at this evolving alliance between evangelical Protestants and Catholics." Rick Warren seems to have common audience with the Pope, either in Rome or in America. There's a picture of November 2014. Here is a video put out by EWTN, the Catholic Television Network. I want you to listen to the words of Rick Warren.
Yeah, far more in common than what divides. When you talk about Pentecostals, charismatics, evangelicals, fundamentalists, Catholics, Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, on and on and on. Well, they would all say we believe in the Trinity, we believe in the Bible, we believe in the resurrection, we believe salvation is in Jesus Christ. These are the big issues. Sometimes Protestants think that Catholics worship Mary like she's another God. But that's not exactly Catholic doctrine. There's the understanding, and then people say, well, what are the saints all about? Why are you praying to the saints? And when you understand what they mean by what they're saying, there's a whole lot more commonality. Yeah, but still a little different. No doubt about that. But the most important thing is, if you love Jesus, we're on the same team. The unity that I think we would see realistically is not a structural unity, but a unity of mission. And so, when it comes to the family, we are co-workers in the field on this for the protection of what we call the sanctity of life, the sanctity of sex, and the sanctity of marriage. So there's great commonality, and there's no division between those things. Many times people have been beaten down for taking a biblical stance. And they start to feel, well, maybe I'm out here all by yourself. No, you're not. The church is growing in Latin America. The church is growing in Asia. The church is growing in Africa. It's not growing in North America or Europe, but it's growing everywhere else. So we kind of have this feeling that maybe we're not as influential, but we're far more influential than people realize.
So the question, is it possible that we're going to see what we call evangelical Christianity join hands, first of all, with Roman Catholicism, And then as we read some of the quotes from Brian McLaren, even other religions, to completely replace biblical Christianity with man-made religion for the cause of peace that will set up the counterfeit bride. I want to conclude my part early tonight because I know we're running late, but I want to show this video once more of what is happening worldwide and why Christians that understand our times need to be vocal. When Pope Francis declared that all religions worship the same God.
La mayor parte de los habitantes del planeta se declaran creyentes. Esto debería provocar un diálogo entre las religiones. No debemos dejar de orar por él y colaborar con quienes piensan distinto.
Confío en Buda.
Creo en Dios.
Creo en Jesucristo.
Creo en Dios. Alá.
Muchos piensan distinto, sienten distinto, buscan a Dios o encuentran a Dios de diversa manera. En esta multitud, en este abanico de religiones, hay una sola certeza que tenemos para todos. Todos somos hijos de Dios.
Creo en el amor.
Creo en el amor.
Like I was saying, I'm sure that you can see the passion that Roger has for his message. He's been doing this for 40 years, and I think it must be a very interesting perspective for him to see the, not evolution, but devolution of the Christian church and the sorrow that it brings. And as I sat back there, I looked around the room, and this town has 150,000. I think we got probably 100 churches. We probably have 200 pastors that work in this town. And I think it's evident what's going on. That sounds like bad news, but I like to think of it as if you're getting closer and closer, there's more bumps on the road, and the signs are there, and we know what comes after this. And so that the joy of the Lord is our strength. And so we need to focus on that, the joy of the Lord. What is the joy of the Lord? Think about that. But thank you, Roger, for being here. Yeah.
Before I conclude, I wanted to mention that our answer to this is trying to get like-minded people together on a common platform. And as I shared in the introduction, I believe it was yesterday, one of the things that we did develop was a website called goodshepherdcalls.org. And if you go to that website, you will see there are a number of like-minded ministries that names are posted along with churches that we would recommend as we find churches that we can recommend. And if there are representatives here, pastors who would like to go look at the website and see if you want to be involved, then let us know. We're trying to find places for people to get good messages. And each Sunday, we find a pastor who we know and trust and believe in and post his message on our website so people are going to Good Shepherd Calls when they can't find a church in their community to get Bible teaching. So that's one of the things. Plus announcing conferences like this that are taking place around the country to inform people what's happening. So I want to end on a positive note. I know it's discouraging. It's been discouraging for me. In fact, I'm at a point in my life where I think maybe it's time to hand this off to someone else who's younger and more aggressive. And God only knows. But thank you all for coming. And may God bless you.